The icy mountain water dragged at Annabelle Rosewood's skirts, pulling her deeper into the raging current as panic tightened around her chest. Just moments ago, she had been walking beside the stagecoach during a rest stop. Now she was being shoved toward the churning Colorado River by the very men who had pretended to be gentlemen since leaving Denver. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. You should have kept your nose out of our affairs, Miss Rosewood, growled Bartholomew. Bart Crowder, the banker who'd sat across from her for 3 days. His fine suit couldn't hide the ugliness twisting his face as he and his partner forced her closer to the brink. No one needs to know what you overheard. Annabelle clawed at roots and rocks, desperate to stop her fall. The men's combined strength tore her grip away, the icy river climbing to her waist, the current threatening to sweep her under. "Please," she gasped, though she knew it was useless to beg. "I won't tell anyone about the robbery, I swear. Too late for that." Bart snapped, shoving her hard. Her scream was swallowed by the roar of the river. The shock of freezing water stole her breath as her heavy skirts turned to anchors, dragging her down. She flailed helplessly, vision-blurring lungs burning as the current spun her like a rag doll. Through the spray, she caught a glimpse of the 2 men walking back toward the stagecoach, as though nothing had happened, as though they hadn't just condemned her to die. Then through the din, a voice thundered from the riverbank. A lone rider was galloping hard, keeping pace with her struggle. "Grab my hand if you want to live!" the cowboy shouted. With the last of her strength, Annabelle thrust her arm out of the water. The horse surged along the bank as the rider leaned dangerously from the saddle, his hand outstretched. Their fingers brushed once, twice, then his iron grip clamped around her wrist. With a powerful heave, he tore her from the river's grasp. "I've got you," he promised, his voice steady as his muscles strained against the river's pull. "Don't you dare give up." Water streamed from her clothes as he dragged her onto the back of his horse. Annabelle coughed violently, forcing the river from her lungs. "They tried to kill me," she rasped. "Hold tight." He rumbled his voice, a deep anchor she felt in her back, where it pressed against his chest. "We need to get you warm before the cold finishes the job." As the stallion carried them from the riverbank, Annabelle clung to life, and to this stranger whose strong arms were the only thing standing between her and death, in a land that offered no mercy. Jesse McCade had been shadowing the stage for 2 days, watching from a distance so as not to rouse suspicion. The Crowder brothers were notorious in Colorado territory, and when Jesse learned of their plans to rob Denver's bank, he knew it was his chance to bring them down. What he hadn't expected was an innocent woman being hurled into the river. He'd seen it all through his spyglass, and without a thought had driven his stallion to the rescue. Now, with the soaked young woman trembling against him, Jesse knew the chase would have to wait. "My cabin's not far," he told her, feeling the violent shivers racking her body. "April's no time for a swim in these waters. What's your name?" "Miss Annabelle." "Annabelle Rosewood," she managed through chattering teeth. "Miss Rosewood, I'm Jesse McCade. Hang on a little longer." As they crested a rise, a sturdy log cabin with a stone chimney came into view. Jesse had built it with his own hands after leaving Texas. It wasn't much, but it was solid, and more importantly, it had a fire. He swung down, lifting Annabelle as if she weighed nothing, and shouldered the cabin door open. Her lips were blue, her face ashen. "Stay with me, Miss Rosewood," he urged, laying her on a bearskin rug by the hearth and working quickly to spark the fire. "They're going to rob the Denver City Bank," she whispered, as heat began to creep back into the room. "I heard them talking when they thought I was asleep." Jesse's jaw tightened. "The Crowder brothers. I've been tracking them for a while." Her eyes widened. Your law used to be a Texas Ranger. Now I take bounties. He rummaged in a trunk and pulled out a wool blanket. You need to get out of those wet clothes or you'll catch your death. I'll step outside while you— Please don't leave me, she begged, her voice breaking. I can't feel my fingers. Propriety wrestled with necessity, but Jesse finally nodded. I'll help you, but only what's needed. I give you my word I'm a gentleman despite what I look like. Annabelle studied him for the first time. His face was weathered by sun and wind stubble, shadowing his jaw, storm-gray eyes, steady beneath the brim of his hat. Trail-worn clothes clung to his broad frame, yet something in his manner made her trust him against all odds. I believe you, she whispered. I believe you, Annabelle Rosewood, whispered her voice, raw but steady. With as much modesty as the moment allowed, Jesse McCade helped her shed the soaked outer layers, his eyes fixed away, leaving her in her thin chemise and petticoat. He tucked the wool blanket snugly around her shoulders before moving to stir up something hot on the stove. How did you end up on that stagecoach? He asked, partly to distract her and partly to piece together her story. Annabelle leaned closer to the fire, her cheeks regaining a faint trace of color. I was headed for Silver Creek to take a schoolteacher's post. After my father, Professor Theodore Rosewood, passed last winter, Boston held nothing for me. I answered an ad for a teacher in a mining camp. Jessie poured steaming coffee into a tin mug, setting it in her trembling hands. Silver Creek's 2 days' ride from here. Place has grown since they hit another vein. But those men, I doubt they'll come looking. They likely think the river finished the job. Settling on the floor with his back against a chair, he added, They'll be in for a surprise when I bring them in and you testify. Annabelle's head snapped up. You're still after them. It's what I do, Miss Rosewood, he said evenly. They're wanted men carrying a hefty bounty, and now they've added attempted murder to the list. She stared into the dancing fire. I've never testified in court before. I've never even set foot in one. First time for everything, Jesse said, a faint smile softening his hard features. But right now you need rest. Tomorrow we'll sort what comes next. That night, despite her exhaustion, Annabelle couldn't sleep. She lay in Jesse's bed. He had taken the bedroll near the hearth, listening to the night sounds of the wild. Her mind replayed the betrayal, the river's terror, and the unlikely rescue by this lone man now sleeping just feet away. She turned her head to watch his face in the dim firelight. Relaxed in slumber, he seemed younger, less hardened. She wondered what had turned a Texas Ranger into a solitary bounty hunter in the Colorado backcountry. Thank you, she whispered into the dark words he would never hear, for saving my life. Morning arrived with sunlight spilling through the small window. Annabelle woke to the smell of coffee and the scrape of movement at the stove. Jesse didn't turn as he said, Your clothes are dry. Hung 'em by the fire last night. Thank you, she murmured, clutching the blanket. Her body ached, but the deadly chill had left her bones. He set a plate of salt pork and biscuits on the table, then stepped outside to give her privacy. When he returned, she sat with her hair loose around her shoulders, the pins lost to the river. We need to talk about what comes next, Jesse said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. Those men are bound for Denver. I need to get there before they hit the bank and vanish. And me? Annabelle asked softly. That's your choice. You can continue to Silver Creek as planned, or you can ride with me and testify against the Crowder brothers. My word against theirs won't hold. I aim to catch them in the act. But your testimony that they tried to drown you will weigh heavy when it's time to hang. Annabelle pushed food around her plate, torn between her new life in Silver Creek and the thought of letting killers walk free. At last, she raised her chin. I'll go with you. I want justice. Jesse gave a small nod approval flickering in his storm-gray eyes. Then we leave within the hour. It's 3 days hard riding. 3 days. Annabel faltered, realizing what it meant traveling alone with a man she barely knew nights under open sky. As if reading her unease, Jesse said, "I understand. Your reputation matters. I give you my word as a former ranger I'll conduct myself honorably. Folks in Denver will know you were under my protection, nothing more." His steady tone eased her worry. "Very well, Mr. McCade. I place my trust in you." "Jesse," he corrected gently. "Out here titles don't mean much, not after pulling someone from a river." Despite everything, Annabel smiled. "Then you must call me Annabel." An hour later, they set out. With his pack mule lame, she rode behind Jesse on his stallion. "We'll buy you a horse in the next town," he promised, guiding them west along a trail she couldn't see, though he seemed to read it like a printed map. The day passed mostly in silence, broken by his warnings about rough patches or brief remarks about the land. By midday, her muscles ached from the unaccustomed strain, but she pressed on, determined not to be a burden. When they paused for jerky and hardtack, Jesse studied her with those watchful eyes. "You're in pain," he said. "I'm fine," she replied quickly, straightening despite the throbbing. "You're not used to the saddle. Nothing shameful in that. I won't be the reason those men escape justice," she shot back firm. Something like admiration stirred in his expression. "Stubborn," he muttered, but there was no scorn in his tone. Jesse McCade dug into his saddlebag and pulled out a small tin of liniment. "Rub this in, it'll ease the soreness." When Annabel Rosewood took it, their fingers brushed, sending a jolt through her that had nothing to do with the spring sunshine. She quickly chalked the warmth up to gratitude and exhaustion. They pressed on until dusk, when Jesse chose a sheltered spot by a creek to make camp. He set to gathering wood with practiced efficiency, while Annabel hovered nearby, uncertain what to do. "Ever camped before?" Jesse asked, catching the hesitation in her eyes. "No," she admitted. "My father was a professor. The only adventures we had were in books." "Then it's time you learned," Jesse said. "Out here, no knowledge goes to waste." He taught her how to stack stones for a fire pit, how to build the kindling for a steady flame. By the time night settled, Annabel felt a flicker of pride for having done her part. "Tomorrow we'll hit Elk Creek," Jesse said, as they ate beans from a blackened pot. "Not much of a town, but we can buy supplies, maybe a horse for you." Annabel's curiosity finally overcame her reserve. "How did you become a bounty hunter?" For a long time, he said nothing, staring into the fire. When he did speak, his voice was low-heavy. "I wore a ranger's badge for 8 years. Believed in law and justice. My partner and I chased a gang to a ranch outside Abilene. They ambushed us. He died in my arms while they rode free." His jaw clenched. "The law couldn't touch him. Too many lies, too much money passed around. So I turned in my badge and hunted them down my way." "Did you find them?" "Every last one." Jesse set his eyes like steel in the firelight. "Took me 2 years. After that, I figured out I had a knack for tracking men the law couldn't reach. Always someone needing that kind of work." He poked the fire with a stick. "What about you? How does a Boston professor's daughter end up bound for a mining town to teach?" Annabel lowered her gaze. "Professor Theodore Rosewood. My father died of pneumonia last winter. He left debts I didn't know about. Everything we owned, sold off. Our house, his books, even my mother's jewelry. I had to stand on my own. Teaching was the only path open to me." "I'm sorry about your father," Jesse said quietly. "Thank you." She hugged her knees. "It's strange how life turns so quick. A week ago, I was on a train with dreams of a new beginning. Now I'm by a fire with a bounty hunter running from men who tried to drown me. Life out here doesn't follow Eastern timetables," Jesse said with a dry edge. "Best get some sleep. We've got miles ahead." He spread his bedroll on the far side of the fire, insisting she take the better spot. Annabel lay beneath the stars, marveling at the strange exhilaration she felt, despite the danger. Jesse McCade wasn't a man easily distracted. He'd built his life on focus, first as a ranger, now as a hunter of men. Yet as they rode toward Elk Creek the next day, his mind kept circling back to the woman behind him. Annabelle Rosewood was unlike any lady he'd ever known. Raised with refinement, but tougher than most he'd met. She hadn't complained once, though he could feel her body strain against the demands of the trail. More than that, she'd chosen justice over comfort. That spoke volumes. There, Jesse said near midday, as they crested a rise. Below them stretched Elk Creek, a scatter of wooden buildings along a muddy street. Not much to look at, but they've got a store and a livery. It looks wonderful to me, Annabelle answered with genuine light in her eyes. Jesse felt a smile tug at his mouth. Her simple delight was refreshing in a world where he usually dealt only with darkness. As they rode into town, he noticed the stairs. A weathered hunter with a woman like her at his back. No small-town gossips would let that pass. "Let me do the talking," he muttered as they dismounted at the general store. These places run on whispers. Inside, Jesse gathered supplies, while Annabelle browsed. The storekeeper, bald and sharp-eyed, sized them up. Passing through. "Heading to Denver," Jesse said flatly, just enough to quiet curiosity. "Got family there?" the man pressed. "Business." Jesse's stare shut him down. The man finished the sale without another word. Outside, Jesse rested a hand lightly at the small of Annabelle's back, guiding her toward the livery. "Was that necessary?" she asked under her breath, referring to his brusqueness. "The less folks know, the better. Word runs quick. If the Crowders have friends around here, I don't want them tipped off." At the livery, they found a gentle bay mare. Jesse inspected her thoroughly before striking a deal. "Can you ride alone?" "It's been years, but yes. My father insisted I learn." "Good. Easier for both of us to keep pace." Within the hour, they left Elk Creek. Annabelle astride her new horse grew steadier in the saddle as they pressed westward. The trail twisted through stands of pine and aspen, the land growing rougher with every mile. Jesse McCade kept a sharp watch on the land around them, his hand never straying far from the colt at his side. "Are you expecting trouble?" Annabelle Rosewood asked, noticing the way his eyes swept every ridge and hollow. "I always expect trouble," Jesse answered flatly. "That's how I stay breathing." By late afternoon, the sky darkened, heavy clouds piling up along the horizon. Jesse studied the distance, jaw set. "Storm's rolling in. We'll need shelter." He spurred his stallion faster, leading Annabelle off the main trail onto a narrow path that climbed into the foothills. Fat raindrops began to fall just as a cabin came into view, snug against a rocky rise. "Line shack," Jesse explained. "Cowhands use it during roundups. Ought to be empty this time of year." Inside the place was dusty, but solid, one room with a fireplace, a rough table, and bunks along the wall. The roof was tight enough to keep the rain out. "Luck's with us," Jesse said, as he struck a match to a lantern. Even some dry wood left behind. While he built a fire, Annabelle shook out the bedding and arranged their supplies. Outside, the storm unleashed its fury, rain hammering the shutters and thunder rattling the mountains. "Will this slow us down too much?" she asked, anxious. "A day at most. Bart and Zeke Crowder won't hit that bank straight away. They'll watch it first, learn the routines. We'll still reach Denver in time." They cooked a simple meal, the cabin warming as the storm raged. Sitting across from each other at the table, the tension between them softened into easy talk. "Tell me about Boston," Jesse said, as he scraped the last beans from his tin plate. "Never been east of the Mississippi." Annabelle's eyes lit with memory. She painted pictures of the common with its grand elms, the brick houses on Beacon Hill, the bookshops along Washington Street. Jesse listened, trying to imagine such a world. Compared to that, this must seem downright primitive, he said, gesturing around them. Different, yes, she admitted. But there's an honesty here I find refreshing. In Boston, appearances rule. Out here it feels less false. There's liars and cheats in the West, too, Jesse countered. Just wear different faces. Maybe. But you're not one of them. You say exactly what you mean. Her frankness caught him off guard. He cleared his throat. No sense in wasting words. Once you fire a bullet, you don't get it back. A crash of thunder made her jump. Jesse rose to check the horses in the lean-to. When he returned dripping rain from his hat and coat, Annabelle stood by the fire, her face troubled. "What's wrong?" he asked, hanging his wet gear near the hearth. "Denver," she whispered. "I've never testified in court. What if I fail? What if they walk free?" Jesse stepped closer, not too near, but enough for her to feel his presence. Justice isn't perfect, but silence guarantees nothing changes. Standing up takes guts, Annabelle. More than most folks ever show. I don't feel brave, just scared. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's pushing on despite it. She studied him, firelight flickering across her features. Is that what you do? Act despite the fear. For a heartbeat, something unguarded flickered in his eyes before he buried it. Fear's a luxury I can't afford in my line of work. Everyone fears something, Jesse. Jesse, he corrected softly. Jesse. She repeated his name, falling gently from her lips. For a moment, the storm outside seemed distant, the fire crackling the only sound. Jesse was suddenly aware of the faint trace of lavender clinging to her, of the way the firelight played in her hair. With effort, he broke away, his voice gruff. "We should rest. Storm may pass by morning." He insisted she take the bunk, while he stretched his bedroll near the hearth. As Annabelle settled under the rough blanket, she found her gaze drifting toward his profile in the firelight. She wondered about the man who had saved her from the river, who lived by the gun, yet carried himself with unbending honor. The storm gave way during the night, leaving a world washed clean and heavy with the smell of wet earth. At first light, they rode out Jesse, certain they could regain lost time if the ground held firm. Riding her own mare now, Annabelle felt freer than she had since leaving Boston. The bay was gentle and sure-footed, making her feel almost capable. "You ride well for a city girl," Jesse remarked as she guided the mare down a steep incline. "My father believed women ought to know more than needlepoint and piano," Annabelle said with a grin. "He taught me himself. Sounds like a man I'd have respected." "I think he would have liked you too," she replied, realizing it was true. Professor Theodore Rosewood had prized honesty above all else, and Jesse McCade carried it like a badge of his own. They made steady progress through the morning, pausing at midday to rest the horses and eat a cold meal. The land was changing, the jagged mountains easing into rolling foothills. "Denver sits in a basin," Jesse explained as they rode. "Right where the plains meet the Rockies. Once we clear these hills, it's about a day's ride across flat ground." Annabelle glanced at him, her eyes steady. "And when we reach the city, what then?" "First thing, we'll get you settled in a proper place," Jesse McCade told her. "There's a respectable boarding house I've stayed at before. Then I'll ride over to see Sheriff Silas Boone. He's a straight man, one of the few. He'll want to hear your story and help us lay a trap for Bart and Zeke Crowder." And after Annabelle Rosewood asked, trying to sound casual, though the thought had weighed on her, "After they're caught and tried," Jesse's voice trailed off. "That depends on the outcome, and on what you choose to do next. My position in Silver Creek may already be gone," she mused. "I was meant to arrive 2 days ago. Denver's a booming town. An educated woman like you won't lack for opportunity there." They rode in silence for a stretch, both lost in thought. By mid-afternoon, they topped a ridge, the land stretching before them, rolling hills flattening into open prairie, and far on the horizon a faint smudge that marked Denver. "We'll camp early tonight," Jesse decided. "There's a spring an hour ahead. Horses need the rest. Tomorrow afternoon, we'll ride into the city. Annabel felt torn, eager to see justice done, yet strangely reluctant for their journey to end. In just a handful of days, everything had shifted. In Boston, she'd been Professor Theodore Rosewood's dutiful daughter, bound by rules and expectations. Out here, she was simply Annabel, a woman discovering her own grit. The campsite Jesse had promised turned out to be a shady grove of cottonwoods. While he tended the horses, Annabel gathered wood, determined to prove her usefulness. "You're a fast learner," Jesse remarked as he watched her stack the kindling. "I've always loved learning," she said, striking a match and coaxing flame into the twigs. "Though I admit this is a far cry from the subjects Father insisted upon: literature, mathematics, philosophy, languages. He always said women's minds were equal to men's, though most of his colleagues scoffed." "He was right," Jesse said firmly, setting about their supper. "Out here, it's not about gender. It's about who can endure. I've seen women outshoot, outride, and outthink plenty of men." By nightfall, they sat by the fire, eating roasted rabbit Jesse had snared. Stars wheeled above them, bright and endless. "Tell me something no one else knows about you, Annabel," said impulsively, breaking the quiet. Jesse arched a brow. "That's a tall order, Miss Rosewood. We've shared a saddle, weathered a storm, and we're riding toward dangerous men. That should earn me one secret." A faint smile touched his lips. "Fair enough." He paused, then said, "I write poetry." Annabel blinked in surprise. "Poetry? Don't look so shocked. Even bounty hunters have thoughts that need setting down." "I'm not shocked," she said gently. "I'm impressed. Would you share some with me?" He looked uncomfortable, but at last he sighed and spoke softly, eyes fixed on the fire. "Stars above the prairie wide, witness to the things I've done, some for justice, some for pride, all beneath the setting sun. Tracks I follow, souls I hunt, men who choose the darker way. Life out here is harsh and blunt, marked by blood at end of day. Yet beauty finds me unexpected, in dawn light on a mountain stream, or eyes that see me unrejected, more than I have ever seemed." When he finished, silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of firewood and a nightbird's cry. Annabel felt something stir deep inside her recognition connection. "That was beautiful," she whispered. Jesse cleared his throat, clearly uneasy with the praise. "Your turn. One secret no one else knows." Annabel hesitated, then spoke with quiet honesty. "I came west not only to work. I was suffocating in Boston. After Father died, my aunt tried to arrange a marriage for me to a man twice my age, one of Father's colleagues, who had always looked at me in a way that made my skin crawl. Everyone said I should be grateful. A woman of 25 with no dowry has few prospects. So you ran," Jesse said without judgment. "I chose a different road," she corrected. "The advertisement for a teacher in Silver Creek appeared the very day my aunt accepted that proposal for me. It felt like providence." And now Jesse asked quietly, "What will you choose when this is done? I don't know," she admitted. "For the first time, I feel like I'm truly deciding my own path instead of walking one laid out by others. It's frightening and exhilarating." Jesse nodded as though he understood too well. Freedom often feels that way at first. The weight of unspoken thoughts lingered between them. Tomorrow they would ride into Denver, back into civilization, back under the watchful eyes of society. This brief stretch of campfires and honest talk would end. Before Annabel could examine the ache that thought brought, Jesse stood. "We should turn in. Tomorrow will test us." He laid her bedroll in the most comfortable spot, taking his own place a little distance away. Annabel lay awake, replaying his poem, the depth it revealed. "More than I have ever seemed," she whispered to herself, wondering what other truths lay hidden beneath Jesse McCade's stoic exterior. Sleep came slow. Jesse, too, stared at the ceiling of stars long into the night, unsettled by thoughts he hadn't let surface in years. Jesse McCade had never spoken his poetry aloud to another soul, and the bare honesty of it left him restless. More unsettling still were the feelings rising inside him, emotions he hadn't allowed in years. Annabel Rosewood was not just striking. She was sharp, resilient, and carried a quiet bravery that commanded his respect. In only a handful of days, she had slipped past walls he'd built from loss and solitude. Tomorrow they would ride into Denver, and reality would set in. She was an educated woman with her whole life ahead of her. He was a bounty hunter with a past best forgotten. Their meeting had been chance, nothing more. Yet as sleep finally took him, Jesse couldn't help but wonder if some encounters were carved by fate rather than accident. Denver in 1876 was a city caught between two worlds' frontier grit and polished ambition. As Jesse and Annabel rode down Larimer Street, she marveled at the contrast brick storefronts beside rough plank shacks, ladies in fine silk skirts brushing past miners in mud-caked boots. It's so alive, she breathed, taking it all in. 20 years ago, there was nothing here but canvas tents, Jesse told her. Gold and silver changed all that. Now it's the beating heart of the territory. He led her to a brick boarding house on a quieter street. A modest sign read, "Mrs. Harriet Hattie Dunlop's Lodging for Ladies." "Wait here," Jesse said, swinging down from his saddle. He returned with a stern woman in her 60s, whose face softened at the sight of Annabel. "Miss Rosewood," she greeted. "Mr. McCade explained you were way late on your journey, and he helped see you safely to Denver. I've a room available, and we can arrange some necessities until you're settled." Annabel caught the careful fiction Jesse had woven far gentler than the truth of their ride together. "Thank you, Mrs. Dunlop. Your kindness means more than I can say." Once Annabel's small bundle of belongings was carried upstairs, Jesse explained his plan. "I'll stable the horses, then head to Sheriff Boone's office. Best you rest today. I'll come back this evening so we can decide our next step." Annabel nodded, though part of her hated to see him leave. In the ordered streets of Denver, with its proper rules and watchful eyes, their trail-borne companionship already felt far away. "Jesse," she said softly, using his name with intent. "Be careful." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise at her concern. "Always am," he replied, tipping his hat before striding out. Mrs. Dunlop showed Annabel to a modest room upstairs with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a small dresser. After days in the wilderness, the promise of a bath and fresh clothes felt like heaven. Mr. McCade arranged for Clementine Barker, a dressmaker, to call this afternoon, Mrs. Dunlop told her. "He said your things were lost on the road." Annabel blinked back, sudden emotion. That was thoughtful of him. He's a peculiar man, that McCade, Mrs. Dunlop mused. "I've known him years, always polite, pays his bill without fuss, never causes trouble. But there's something in his eyes." She shook her head. "No matter. Lunch at noon in the dining room. I'll send up hot water for your bath." Alone. At last, Annabel sank onto the bed. Weariness crashing over her. The past days had been a storm of fear, danger, and an unexpected bond. Now in this quiet room, the truth of her situation came sharp. No job, little money about to testify against dangerous men. Yet despite the uncertainty, she felt more alive than she had in years. The cautious daughter from Boston felt like a stranger. That afternoon, Clementine Barker arrived with her measuring tape and quick hands. By evening, Annabelle had 2 new dresses, one sturdy blue day dress and a deep green gown more fitting for town. Clementine even left a bundle of underthings and toiletries. Just after sunset, Jesse returned. Dunlop led him to a small parlor where Annabelle waited in her new dress hair, neatly pinned. Jesse paused in the doorway, unreadable, as he took in her transformed figure. She in turn noticed his clean shave and fresh shirt, though the rugged air of the trail still clung to him. "You look well, Miss Rosewood," he said formally, aware of Hattie Dunlop nearby. "And you as well, Mr. McCade," she replied, her tone equally measured. Once they were alone, some of the formality melted, though not completely. Civilization was already rebuilding walls between them. "I spoke with Sheriff Boone," Jesse began. "He's solid. I told him everything. He wants your statement tomorrow morning." "Have Bart and Zeke Crowder made it to Denver yet?" Annabelle asked. "Not yet, but my eyes at the livery and hotels are watching. Odds are they're taking their time keeping low." Jesse leaned forward. "Sheriff Boone believes with your testimony and catching them in the act, we'll have enough to see them hang." The starkness of his words made Annabelle shiver. How will you catch them?" "We'll bait a trap," Jesse explained. "Boone will spread word he's riding to Colorado Springs for a week. Make him think the bank's guard is down. Meanwhile, I'll be watching along with deputies Boone trusts. And my role Annabelle Rosewood asked. For now, Jesse McCade answered firmly. "You give your statement, then stay safe here until it's finished. Those men already tried to kill you once. I won't give them another chance." Annabelle wanted to argue, but knew he was right. "Very well. But when they're taken, I want to be there to see justice served." Jesse studied her, then gave a single nod. "That can be arranged once they're in irons." An awkward quiet settled between them, the urgency of their purpose now addressed. At last, Annabelle said, "The dresses are lovely. Thank you for your thoughtfulness." "Seemed necessary," Jesse muttered with a shrug, uneasy with her gratitude. "I also sold your horse. The money should keep you steady until you decide your next move." "My next move," Annabelle echoed. "I suppose I should ask if Silver Creek still needs a teacher." Or Jesse said, his face unreadable, "You might look here in Denver. Town's growing fast. Schools popping up every few months." Annabelle hesitated, then asked the question that had lingered in her heart. "And you, after the Crowder brothers are caught, what then?" "There's always another bounty," Jesse said simply. "Always another trail." The thought of him riding away, returning to that solitary life, left a hollow ache inside her. In just days, this man had become important to her in ways she was still grasping. "Strange," she said softly. "A week ago, I was a passenger on a stagecoach with a clear purpose. Now, everything feels uncertain." "Not everything," Jesse countered. "You're still the same woman, bright, brave, stubborn. Those things will serve you no matter which road you choose." His words warmed her. "Thank you for everything." Jesse stood, signaling the end of their talk. "I'll come for you at 9 tomorrow to go to Sheriff Boone's office. Try to rest." As he turned, Annabelle called Jesse. He paused. "Be careful. The Crowders are dangerous men." A ghost of a smile tugged at his lips. "So am I, Miss Rosewood. So am I." She watched from the window as his tall figure disappeared down the street. Only then did she admit the truth she had been dodging. She was falling in love with Jesse McCade. The realization was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. Love had never fit into her plans for independence, yet Jesse was unlike any man she had ever known. Harsh and gentle, relentless and merciful solitary, yet capable of poetry. Whether he could return such feelings, whether two people from such different worlds could share a future, she didn't know. For now, she could only wait hope and prepare to face the men who wanted her dead. The next morning, Jessie arrived precisely at 9, dressed in a way that startled her. The trail-worn bounty hunter was gone. In his place stood a man in a sharp, dark suit, crisp white shirt, gun belt still slung low on his hips. His eyes were as watchful as ever. "You look different," Annabelle remarked as they walked toward Sheriff Boone's office. "In town, appearances matter," Jessie replied. "People judge quick." Sheriff Silas Boone was a broad-shouldered man with a neat beard and shrewd eyes. He listened intently as Annabelle told her story of the stagecoach and the river stopping now and then to ask precise questions. "Miss Rosewood," he said when she finished, "you've shown real courage. The Crowder brothers have been tied to robberies across the territory, but witnesses tend to vanish or change their tune before trial." "They won't scare me," Annabelle said, her voice steady. Boone exchanged a glance with Jessie. "Even so, best we keep your role quiet. For now, folks can think McCade just brought a lady friend from back east." Heat rose in Annabelle's cheeks, but she saw the practicality of the ruse. "I understand." They spent an hour discussing the plan. Deputies Boone trusted were already posted on the main roads and keeping an eye on the Denver City Bank. "They'll watch for a few days before making their move," Boone explained. In the meantime, Jessie added, "You'll keep a normal routine. Eat at the boarding house, maybe visit shops or the library, but never alone. I've arranged for Martha Lou Callahan, a deputy's wife, to escort you when I can't." Annabelle wanted to protest being treated like fragile china, but the look in Jessie's eyes stopped her. This wasn't about appearances, it was survival. "Very well," she agreed. "But I hope this ends quickly." "As do we all," Boone said, rising to close the meeting. "McCade knows how to reach me. Until then, welcome to Denver, Miss Rosewood." The following days passed in a strange half-life. By day, Annabelle explored Denver with Martha Lou Callahan, wandering shops and gardens like any other visiting lady. By evening, Jessie came to the boarding house to give updates, though little changed. On the third night, as they sat in Harriet Dunlop's parlor, under her watchful eye, Annabelle saw the tension in Jessie's shoulders. "What is it?" she asked quietly. "Has something happened?" "The Crowders are here," he said grimly. "Checked into the Silver Dollar Hotel under false names. My contact spotted them." Annabelle's heart jumped. "Then it begins." "They went to the bank today," Jesse McCade said, grimly, his jaw tightening. "Claimed they were businessmen from Kansas City talking about opening accounts for a supply company." Annabelle Rosewood felt her stomach knot. "They're setting themselves up as respectable customers." "Exactly. 2, maybe 3 days before they strike. They're careful but not patient. And once you catch them," she asked, "they'll sit in jail till the circuit judge comes next week. Trial will follow soon after." Jessie hesitated. If all goes as planned, it could be over inside a fortnight. 2 weeks. The thought rang in Annabelle's mind. 2 weeks until justice was done. 2 weeks until Jessie likely rode off after another bounty. The idea hollowed her chest. "I've been thinking about my future," she blurted. "I wrote Silver Creek explaining my delay, but word came today they've already hired another teacher." "I'm sorry," Jessie said, his tone flat, unreadable. "Actually, I'm not sure I am. Denver has opportunities I hadn't considered. Sheriff Boone's wife is helping start a girls' school here. They're looking for teachers with Eastern education." Something flickered in Jessie's eyes. Surprise, maybe even hope, but his voice stayed even. "That sounds like a fine chance. It would mean staying in Denver?" "For a while," Annabelle said, watching him closely. Before he could answer, Harriet Hattie Dunlop swept in with a tray of tea, ending the moment. When Jessie rose to leave later, he paused at the door. "Be sharp tomorrow. The Crowders know this city." Even if they don't realize you're alive, we can't take risks. I understand, Annabelle said. Mrs. Callahan and I plan only to visit the library. Good. I'll come by tomorrow night with news. He hesitated, then added quietly, Take care, Annabelle. It was the first time he had spoken her name since they'd arrived. The intimacy of it warmed her more than she wanted to admit. And you, Jessie, she whispered back. Be safe. The next morning dawned bright and warm. Annabelle and Martha Lou Callahan spent hours at Denver's small but well-stocked library. For the first time since leaving Boston, Annabelle lost herself in books. They lunched at a quiet cafe, then strolled along Cherry Creek. Crossing Arapahoe Street, Annabelle froze. Less than 20 yards away, stepping out of a tobacco shop, was Bartholomew Bart Crowder, the man who had shoved her into the river. Her hand clamped around Martha Lou's arm. What is it, dear? The older woman asked. That man Annabelle whispered, forcing her legs to keep moving. Gray suit, gold watch chain. That's Bart Crowder. Martha Lou didn't turn her head. Are you certain? Absolutely. Annabelle's heart pounded so hard, she thought the whole street must hear it. Sheriff Boone's office is 3 blocks. We'll go there now. They kept their pace steady, though every instinct screamed at Annabelle to run. They were nearly at the corner when disaster struck. A boy darted along the boardwalk and crashed into her. She caught his arm, steadied him, and looked up into Bart Crowder's eyes. Shock. Recognition. Fury. You, he barked. Impossible. Annabelle froze for a heartbeat, then made her choice. Run, she urged Martha Lou, shoving the woman forward as she spun the other way. Bart shouted, but she didn't catch the words. She just ran, hoping to lead him off. Her boots pounded the planks, then cobblestones as she cut through a narrow alley. His heavy strides thundered after her. She burst onto a side street and chose right toward the crowd, toward safety. Suddenly, a hand clamped on her arm, dragging her into a shadowed doorway. She opened her mouth to scream, only for a calloused palm to cover it. It's me, Jessie's voice rasped against her ear. Don't make a sound. He pressed her back against the wall, his body shielding hers. Moments later, Bart thundered past, face twisted with rage, never glancing their way. How did you? Annabelle began, when Jessie dropped his hand. Martha Lou found me near the bank. She told me what happened. His storm-gray eyes burned with controlled fury. Are you hurt? No. Just shaken? Annabelle suddenly realized how close they were, how his body curved protectively around hers. What now? She whispered. Now we move faster, Jessie said, his voice low and hard. Bart knows you're alive. He'll tell Zeke. They'll either run or try to finish what they started. His gaze locked on hers, fierce and unyielding. I'm taking you somewhere safe until this ends. The boarding house will be the first place they check, Jessie McCade cut in sharply. No, we'll use another spot. But first I need you off the street. He guided Annabelle Rosewood through twisting alleys and narrow service passages, moving with the ease of a man who knew Denver's hidden routes by heart. At last, they came out near a modest hotel on the edge of the business district. Stay here, Jessie said, settling her in a recessed doorway. I'll make sure it's clear. Minutes later, he returned and hurried her inside, leading her up to a plain but tidy room on the 3rd floor. A single bed, 1 chair, and a table stood against bare walls. This is your room? Annabelle asked, spotting the worn carpetbag in the corner. I keep it as a base when I'm working here, Jessie confirmed. Few folks know about it. Certainly not Bart or Zeke Crowder. He checked the street from the window before pulling the curtains tight. You'll be safe here while I hunt them. You're leaving? Annabelle's alarm slipped into her voice. I have to. Bart's seen you. Their plans will change and I need to track them before they vanish. His expression softened at her distress. I've already sent word to Sheriff Boone. He'll post a deputy outside your door. Nobody gets through. Annabelle bit back her protest. She wanted to follow to help, but she knew she'd only slow him down, or worse, get him killed protecting her. Be careful, she whispered. They're desperate men. So am I, Jesse said grimly. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small derringer. Do you know how to handle this? My father taught me the basics, Annabelle admitted, staring at the weapon. But I've never... It's simple, Jesse cut in. Click off the safety aim and squeeze. 2 shots. Make them count. He placed it gently in her hands. I don't expect you'll need it, but just in case. The pistol's weight was both terrifying and strangely comforting. Thank you. Jesse moved toward the door, then hesitated, turning back with an unreadable look. For an instant it seemed he might say more. Instead, he gave one short nod and slipped out the door, closing firm behind him. Alone, Annabelle sat on the bed, the derringer heavy in her palm. Outside, Denver's sounds went on, wagons, clattering voices, calling the distant whistle of a train. Life carried on as if nothing had changed while hers balanced on a knife's edge. She thought of Jesse out there risking himself for her, and the thought cut deeper than she expected. In Boston, she had dreamed of freedom, of standing on her own. She hadn't expected to meet someone who made her question whether independence was the only thing she wanted. As shadows lengthened, she paced the room, nerves fraying with each hour. A deputy brought supper, but she barely touched it, mind circling back to Jesse. Near midnight, heavy footsteps halted outside. Annabelle snatched the derringer from the table hands, trembling, and aimed at the door. A soft knock came. It's me, Jesse's voice murmured. Relief surged through her. She flung open the door and pulled him in. He locked it behind him, weariness etched in his face, dust on his coat, a cut above one eye. What happened? She asked, setting the pistol aside. Did you find them? We caught them ready to run? Jesse said, removing his hat and raking a hand through his hair. Bart drew on Boone's deputies. They had no choice. He's dead. Zeke surrendered once he saw his brother fall. He's locked up now. Annabelle sank onto the bed, absorbing it. Dead. He forced their hand, Jesse said flatly. Zeke's in jail under heavy guard, so it's finished. Almost. You'll testify when the judge rides circuit, but the danger's over. Jesse leaned against the wall, exhaustion written in every line. You can return to Hattie Dunlop's tomorrow if you'd like. And you? She asked quietly. The marshal will pay once Zeke is convicted. After that? He shrugged, though his voice carried a reluctant note. There's always another job. Something in his tone gave Annabelle courage. She rose and faced him. Does there have to be? Jesse's gray eyes searched hers. What are you asking? I'm asking if there's a reason for you to stay, in Denver, with me. He went, still conflict plain in his face. You don't know what you're saying. You don't know what I've done, the life I've led. I know enough, Annabelle answered, stepping closer. You risked your life to save mine. You've treated me with nothing but respect. And I know there's poetry in you, Jesse McCade, words that tell me there's more to you than the hardness you show. Poetry doesn't wash away blood, he said, voice low. I've killed men, made choices you can't imagine. We've all made choices, Annabelle countered. Mine brought me west to an uncertain future. Yours brought you to that riverbank where you pulled me out alive. Now she stood right before him, close enough to see the pulse in his throat, close enough that neither could pretend distance any longer. Maybe neither of us has to face what comes next alone. Jesse McCade's expression shifted, the hard edges, softening vulnerability, showing through cracks he usually kept sealed tight. You deserve better than a worn-out bounty hunter haunted by too many ghosts. Annabelle Rosewood held his gaze, her voice steady. What I deserve is the right to choose. And I choose you, Jesse McCade, if you'll have me." For a long breath, silence wrapped around them, heavy with possibility. Then Jesse lifted a hand, rough fingers brushing her cheek with unexpected gentleness. "Are you sure?" he asked, voice raw. "Life with me won't be easy. I've never been more certain of anything," Annabelle replied, covering his hand with hers. "And I don't want easy. I want real." The last of his resistance gave way. With slow care, he drew her into his arms, one hand at her waist, the other cupping her face. When his lips finally touched hers, Annabelle felt as though every trial, every loss, even being shoved into that river, had led her to this moment, to this man. The kiss deepened, months of solitude and years of longing pouring out in the way they clung to one another. When they broke apart, Jesse rested his forehead against hers, his breath uneven. "I never expected you," he murmured. "Never thought I'd feel this again, or that a woman like you could want a man like me." Annabelle smiled through the rush of emotion. Sometimes the most unexpected roads lead us right where we belong. 2 weeks later, Ezekiel Zeke Crowder stood trial for attempted murder robbery and more. With Annabelle's testimony and Sheriff Silas Boone's evidence, the verdict came swift guilty on all counts. The judge set the hanging within the month. As they left the courthouse, Jesse's hand closed over Annabelle's, a gesture that still sent a thrill through her, despite its new familiarity. "How does it feel?" he asked, "knowing justice has been served?" "Like closing one chapter," she said softly, and opening another. They walked in contented silence toward the small house they had rented on Denver's outskirts. Modest with a view of the Rockies, it was a world away from Jesse's lonely hotel rooms, but enough for a beginning. His bounty money combined with Annabelle's new teaching post at Denver's School for Young Ladies gave them the means to start building a life. "I got a letter today," Jesse said as they neared their door. "From an old ranger friend. He's sheriff in a growing town near Colorado Springs. Says he could use a deputy." Annabelle's brow lifted. "Are you considering it?" "Maybe." Jesse's tone was thoughtful. "Bounty work is a lonely trail. Wearing a badge again would mean roots. A future." He squeezed her hand. "A future with you?" "Is that what you want?" Annabelle asked, heart racing. Jesse stopped, turning fully toward her. The setting sun gilded his features, softening the lines hardship had carved. "What I want is to wake up beside you every morning, to build something lasting, to see justice served without always being the one to pull the trigger, to be the man you believe I can be." Tears welled in Annabelle's eyes. "You already are, Jesse. You just couldn't see it." A rare smile broke across his face, transforming him. "I see it now through you, and that changes everything." Hand in hand, they walked homeward, the mountains glowing with twilight, their futures bound together by a river's danger, and a hand reached out in time. 5 years later, Willow Creek had grown from a scatter of shacks to a thriving community. The silver mines had brought prosperity. The church bells rang on Sundays, businesses thrived, and Sheriff Abner Rollins had a steady deputy at his side, Jesse McCade respected for his fairness and unyielding justice. The McCade home stood on a rise just beyond town, a sturdy 2-story with a wide porch. There Annabelle often sat, grading lessons as headmistress of the Willow Creek School. Her progressive methods had once raised brows, but now she was admired, credited with shaping the next generation. That evening she rocked gently on the porch, with a small leather book open in her lap. Verses Jesse had written over the years, poetry, that quietly chronicled their journey from river's edge to the life they had built together. Hoofbeats drew her eyes to the road. Jesse rode up at an easy pace. Their 3-year-old daughter, Sarah, perched before him, laughing, as her father pointed out tracks in the dust. Mama Sarah cried, waving. Papa showed me rabbit prints. Did he now? Annabel called back with a smile. Jessie swung down, lifting Sarah to the ground. A whole family, the girl announced solemnly. Papa says they're storing up for winter just like us. Jessie leaned down to kiss Annabel. Sorry we're late. Someone needed to stop and inspect every trail and bush along the way. The curious mind should never be rushed, Annabel teased, repeating one of her father's sayings. Sarah scampered inside to join her brother Daniel, now 4, who showed signs of inheriting his father's quiet strength and his mother's love of books. Their laughter filled the air as Jessie slipped an arm around Annabel's waist, her head resting against his shoulder. Got a letter from Sheriff Boone, she said. He and Martha Lou are visiting next month. They want to see how much Willow Creek has changed. Jessie nodded. It'll be good to see them. We owe them plenty. Annabel smiled softly. We owe more than that. We owe a river. And the moment a hand reached out when it mattered most. Sometimes I wonder what would have become of me if you hadn't been following the Crowder brothers that day. I don't, Jessie McCade answered plainly. Some things are just meant to be, even if the trail to get there isn't what we expect. Annabel Rosewood smiled, recalling the guarded man who once swore he had no poetry in him. Speaking of unexpected paths, Elvira May Whitcomb at the Mercantile mentioned a new family just arrived in town. They've got twins about Sarah's age. I thought I might stop by tomorrow, help them get settled. Always the welcoming committee, Jessie teased, brushing a kiss against her temple. This town gave us a home when we were still finding our way, Annabel reminded him softly. Feels right to do the same for others. They stood together in easy silence as the sun melted into shades of rose and gold, the mountains rising in the distance, steadfast unchanging like the wild beauty that had drawn them west along different trails, but led them to the same place. I've got something for you, Jessie said, suddenly pulling a small carved box from his pocket. The wood was etched with flowing leaves and water. Annabel opened it to find a silver pendant, shaped like a river's current, a small pearl nestled in its curve. It's beautiful, she whispered, fingers brushing the delicate piece. A reminder, Jessie said, his voice rough with feeling. Of the river that nearly took you, and the current that carried us both someplace we never expected. Tears gathered in Annabel's eyes as she turned fully toward him. After all these years, you still find ways to surprise me, Jessie McCade. Planning on keeping it up for at least 50 more, he promised, drawing her into his arms. As twilight settled over Willow Creek, Jessie and Annabel stood together on their porch, their children's laughter spilling warm and bright from the home they'd built. From desperate beginnings on a riverbank, a hand reaching out a life saved, they had forged a love as steady as the mountains around them, as vital as the water that had brought them together. A love born from chance, tempered by hardship, and kept alive by choice. Grab my hand if you want to live, he had called to her that day, never knowing he was offering more than rescue from a raging river. He was offering a future they continued to build one day, one choice, one moment at a time. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West, stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you.